The signal was there from the beginning. I want to be precise about that, because there's a version of this story where I could be kind to myself and say I didn't know. I did know. Not the specifics, I didn't know the specifics until much later. But I knew, in the diffuse and persistent way that knowledge sometimes arrives, that something was wrong. The knowledge arrived as a texture. A slightly off quality to interactions that I couldn't have articulated precisely, but that was consistently there, like a faint hum that you only notice when everything else goes quiet. I noticed it and I dismissed it, and the dismissal became a habit, and the habit became a choice, and the choice became 2 years of my career inside a situation I should have exited much sooner. I was brought into a company as a director of operations. The company was a startup in a phase of rapid growth, the kind of place where things moved fast and not everything was formalized, and a certain amount of ambiguity was expected and even celebrated as evidence of velocity. I had worked in startups before. I understood the culture. I understood that structure and process were often built in arrears, after the chaos had generated enough revenue to fund the formalization. What I understood less well, going in, was the specific character of this particular chaos. The CEO, whose name I'll leave out, had a very specific way of communicating that I now recognize as a pattern but didn't at the time. He was extraordinarily good in formal, observable settings and extremely difficult in private ones. In all-hands meetings he was inspiring and clear and specific. In smaller settings, one-on-ones, team meetings, side conversations, he was inconsistent in ways that I initially attributed to the demands of his role. A company growing fast has a very busy CEO. I told myself the inconsistency was busyness. I told myself the contradictory directives were the result of rapidly shifting priorities. I told myself that my job, as an operations leader, was to create structure around the chaos, not to be unsettled by it. I was unsettled by it. But I was calling it something else. The faint hum I'd been hearing from the beginning, that off-quality texture, was specifically this: in the company's culture, reality was malleable. Not in a crisis management, everything is negotiable way. In a more specific, more troubling way, the official story and the actual story were frequently not the same thing. Things were announced publicly before they existed. Deals were described to investors in ways that didn't match their actual terms. Culture was performed for recruiting purposes and contradicted by day-to-day experience. None of this was ever stated. It was enacted. And the enactment was so smooth and so practiced that for many months I genuinely questioned my own read of it. Month 7, I was asked to prepare an operational report that would be presented to the board. I prepared an honest one. I brought it to the CEO, and he went through it, and by the time we'd finished, about 40% of the numbers had changed. Not corrected, changed. The actual numbers weren't wrong. The new numbers were better, and they weren't accurate. I sat in that meeting and felt the specific physical sensation of something important happening. A decision point. The kind that doesn't announce itself but that you recognize, sometimes only later, as the fork in the road. I said, "These aren't the actual figures." He said, "These reflect where we're tracking." I didn't say anything more. I should have said more. I should have said that I couldn't put my name on a document with inaccurate data. I should have said that if the board needed a different picture than the real one, I couldn't be the person who constructed it. I should have said that clearly, in that meeting, and then I should have made a decision about whether to stay in a company where that was the expectation. I didn't say any of that. I wrote the revised report. And in writing it, I made myself complicit. Not dramatically. Not in a way that was visible or actionable. But in the specific, interior way that matters most. I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I did it anyway. The hum I'd been dismissing for 7 months got significantly louder after that meeting. Because now it wasn't just a texture I was experiencing, it was something I was participating in. I stayed 9 more months. Not because I stopped seeing it. Because I was afraid of what leaving would cost professionally, afraid of what it would mean about the 7 months I'd already invested, afraid of the conversation I'd have to have about why I'd left. And afraid, in a way that was harder to admit, of the meaning of what I'd done in that meeting. If I left because the company was operating dishonestly, I had to acknowledge that I had been part of that dishonesty for a period. That accountability was uncomfortable. Staying was easier. Staying meant I could continue managing the meaning of my presence there. Leaving would force a reckoning. I left eventually, for different ostensible reasons. A better opportunity. Legitimate reasons. Not the real reason. The real reckoning happened privately, over the year that followed. I had to sit with the specific understanding that I had known something was wrong and stayed anyway. Had known since month 1, specifically. Had continued to receive confirming evidence throughout. And had continued to tell myself a story that made staying feel manageable. What I've developed since is what I'd call a zero-tolerance policy for the hum. When that off-quality texture appears and persists, when I notice that the official story and the actual story are misaligned, when I see the pattern underneath the performance, I don't file it away for later. I take it seriously immediately. That doesn't always mean leaving. It means investigating. It means being honest with myself about what I'm seeing before I've had the chance to rationalize it away. Because rationalization is fast and thorough, and accuracy requires intention to sustain. The signal was there from the beginning. I just needed to decide it was worth listening to. I know that now. Fully. There is something I want to add that I think is essential to the story, not as a coda, but as the part that actually contains the lesson. Understanding what happened is only half of it. The other half is what you do with the understanding. And for a long time, I confused having insight with having changed. They are not the same thing. You can understand a pattern completely and still enact it perfectly, because patterns live below the level of understanding, in the body and the habit and the reflex. Real change requires not just seeing the pattern but building a different response, not once, but repeatedly, until the new response starts to feel as natural as the old one did. That process is slow. It's humbling. There are weeks where I can track the insight and weeks where I slip back into the old behavior before I've noticed it happening. And the slipping back, I've learned, is not evidence of failure. It's evidence of learning. You can only see the pattern when you're outside it. When you're inside it, you're in it, and the work is to build enough awareness that the outside perspective arrives faster. What helped me most was specificity. Not I want to do better, but the concrete, exact question, what will I do differently in this specific type of situation, the next time it appears? What is the exact moment where the old behavior begins? And what is the alternative action I can take at that exact moment? Those questions, practiced, tested, refined, are what actual change is made of. Not resolution. Not insight alone. Specific, practiced, repeated alternative actions. I'm not done. I'm not fixed. I don't think that's how this works. But I'm different than I was. In specific, measurable, real ways. And the story I've just told you is part of why. The telling matters. It keeps it from becoming something I store away and don't examine. It makes it real, again, every time I say it. And real is where the change lies. I think often about the version of myself that was inside the experience, not this one, the one that can look back and see it clearly, but the one who was in the middle of it, navigating with partial information and real fear and the limited emotional resources of someone who hadn't yet learned what was happening. That version of me was doing the best she could with what she had. That's not a get-out-of-accountability-free card. But it is a necessary part of the honest accounting, because self-understanding can't be built on self-punishment alone. At some point the punishment has to give way to comprehension. And comprehension, real comprehension, requires some compassion for the person you were before you knew what you know now. I didn't have the tools I have now. I built them since. Slowly, imperfectly, with help from therapists and honest conversations and the specific, uncomfortable practice of sitting with things I'd rather not sit with. The goal is not to arrive at a version of myself that doesn't make mistakes. That version doesn't exist. The goal is to make a different kind of mistake each time. Not the same one, wearing a new costume. A genuinely new one, smaller, or at least different in its shape, because I'm bringing more awareness to the territory than I had the last time. Progress doesn't feel the way we imagine it will when we're inside the difficult chapter. It doesn't feel like transformation. It feels like the gap between impulse and action getting slightly longer. Like the moment of recognition arriving slightly earlier. Like the voice that says, "Wait, not yet, is this what you actually want to do here?" Getting just a little louder, a little more reliable, a little more present when you need it most. That voice is there. It's always been there. I just had to learn to stay quiet long enough to hear it. And that's the practice, in the end. Staying quiet enough to hear yourself. In all the noise of living, in all the urgency and the wanting and the fear and the pressure, staying quiet enough to hear what you actually know. I'm still learning. But I'm listening now.